it would not surprise me, not even a little bit, to see $10,000 gold before the end of 2026. I think we will. I like to be conservative in my written forecast because
Wow.
it's good to be
Yeah.
right. But yeah, but $5,000 is within reach. But $10,000 would just come as no surprise for gold. So people think of the dollar price, $100 an ounce for $1,000 an ounce. And let's say you have 50 ounces and gold goes up $1,000 an ounce. Well, you just made $50,000. Having said that, there's no way gold's going to where we're talking about $5,000 to $10,000 an ounce. The silver's not going to move also, which it will. So $200 silver would be in the same vein as gold going to to $10,000 an ounce.
Jim Rickards, renowned economist and author known for his insights on global monetary systems, recently shared a bold outlook on precious metals that has captured investor attention. Rickards stated that it would not surprise him to see gold reach $10,000 per ounce before the end of 2026, noting that even 5,000 gold appears well within reach. While he prefers conservative forecasts in writing, Rickards emphasized that rapid price acceleration is entirely possible given current monetary conditions. He explained that investors often underestimate how powerful dollar-based moves can be. For example, a $1,000 increase in gold prices translates into a $50,000 gain for someone holding 50 ounces. Importantly, Rickards stressed that silver will not lag behind gold. In his view, if gold advances toward $10,000, then $200 silver naturally follows, maintaining the historical relationship between the two metals. According to Rickards, this precious metal cycle may only be getting started. Now, we present the clips from Jim Rickards' interview. Before we continue to discuss this, please subscribe to our channel and activate the bell icon for timely updates. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Silver lags. I mean, gold will lead the way, but silver's along for the ride, but it does lag. But now the lag has caught up and silver's taken on a life of its own. For example, who owns the U.S. gold? We have 8,133 tons. Who actually owns it? Well, the answer is the U.S. Treasury, although half of it's in Fort Knox and half of it's in West Point. So I always say the U.S. Army owns it because there are two Army forts. But the U.S. Treasury technically owns it, which is part of the executive branch. So it's kind of the people's gold. But when the central bank owns it, then you have to say, well, who controls the central bank? Who's really in charge of that? And they subordinate to the ECB. And all she's saying is, hey, it's Italy's gold. By the way, very fascinating comment. This goes back about 10 years, but it's out there. You can find it. Mario Draghi was the head of the ECB. But before that, he was head of the Bank of Italy, which is the central bank of Italy. And he was giving a speech at Harvard, and they were talking about gold. And somebody asked him a question, well, what about, you were head of the Bank of Italy. What about Italy's gold? And he said, I never sold 1 ounce of gold because I considered it a hedge against the dollar. Now, here's the head of the ECB, the head of the Bank of Italy, full globalist, no one doubts Mario Draghi's credentials, but he said, I considered it a dollar hedge, and it is. So even the globalists understand it. People know about the ECB, but they forget that all these countries still have central banks. I mean, there is a central bank of the Netherlands, central bank of Italy, the Bundesbank in Germany, et cetera. Those institutions still exist. They have less of a monetary role, but they're still around. But one by one, these banks are calling up the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and asking for their gold back. A lot of that gold, all the gold, not all the gold in the world, but a big portion of all the official gold in the world, about 20%, is in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in a vault. There's about 6,000 metric tons there. Well, one, but you see Germany, Netherlands, Italy saying, hey, give us our gold back, number one. The Russians were smart. They kept it in Russia. They never put it in New York to begin with, of course. So there's a little bit of a run on the Fed when it comes to gold. Number one. And then number two, when it gets home, back to, Rome or, The Hague or whatever, who owns it? And that's exactly what you're pointing at. But yeah, I think Maloney's going to prevail on this, but it is part of this nationalist wave that's going on. If you want a gold standard, you need some gold. And these countries have a fair amount of gold. I mean, Germany, Italy, and France are kind of, second, third, and fourth on the list. U.S. is number one. China, officially, they say they have about 2,800 metric tons. There's good reason to believe they have a lot more than that, but no one knows quite how much.
Right.
But if you go by the official numbers, Italy, France, and Germany are like number 2, 3, and 4. And then Russia's not far behind. So they have an enormous amount of gold, but they also have enormous money supply. So you need some ratio of gold to money to maintain a gold standard. It doesn't have to be 100%. The Austrian economists bang the table. It's got to be 100%. No, it doesn't. I mean, historically, 20 to 40% has been enough. The UK in the 19th century was about 20%. The U.S. in the first half of the 20th century was about 40%. And then we lowered it to 25%. Now it's about 7 or 8%. I mean, it's relatively small. So you need a lot more gold to have a gold standard. So no, I don't see your other point, Danielle, about the EU possibly breaking up.
Rickards explains that while gold traditionally leads precious metals rallies, silver has now caught up and begun moving independently. Rickards highlights the importance of gold ownership, noting that the U.S. Treasury technically owns America's 8,133 tons of gold stored at Fort Knox in West Point. He contrasts this with Europe, where central banks like those of Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands are repatriating gold from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, signaling rising monetary nationalism. Rickards recalls former ECB President Mario Draghi calling gold a hedge against the dollar, proving even globalists understand its role. According to Rickards, any future gold-backed system would require far higher gold-to-money ratios, reinforcing gold's long-term strategic value. Let's get back to the interview.
The Fed is practically irrelevant in a lot of ways, not just the price of gold, but in terms of monetary policy and so forth. We don't have time to do a deep dive on the Fed, maybe some future show. But you're right. That's just some Bloomberg writer trying to get through the day. The Fed has nothing to do with it. There are drivers of gold. There are fundamental drivers. Now, some of this is momentum. It gets going and people jump in, but we're not at the crazy, momentum stage where, it's a retail outlet. People were lined up around the block. I mean, some places,
Exactly.
but we're not there yet. But there are some really deep fundamental things driving gold. One of them we've talked about before. Central banks are net buyers. That tipping point transition that was in 2010. From 1970 to 2010, central banks were net sellers. Since then, they've been net buyers. But the number of central banks joining in and the amount of net buying is continued to increase. So that's just a good fundamental driver. And it's important for investors because central banks are actually pretty smart buyers. They mess up other things, but they're pretty good when it comes to buying gold. They don't chase the price, but they kind of put a floor under it. No guarantees, but they buy the dips, to use a cliche. Russia's a good example. They're very transparent. They would just put in a standing order, 10 tons a month or whatever. They didn't want to disrupt the market. But if they see a dip, they'll buy it. So you've got it's great for investors because you have all the upside, but the downside is kind of limited because the central banks will step in. So that's number one. Number two, good old-fashioned supply and demand. The supply has been flat for 7 years, around 4,000 metric tons a year. Up a little bit, down a little bit. I'm not saying peak gold or gold output. There are no more gold mines that are out there, although they are getting harder to find and more expensive to mine. But demand keeps going up. So at least where I went to school, when demand goes up and supply is flat, the price goes up. That's how you make the market work. Institutional investors are dipping their toe in the water. And the thing to understand about institutional investors, now I'm talking about sovereign wealth funds, endowments, big mutual funds and so forth. Their allocation to gold is tiny. It's like 1 or 2%. You would think maybe it's 5 to 10%. It's not. 1 to 2% is the right order of magnitude. If they just went from, let's say, 2% to 3%, that's not like a huge move, but just go from 2% to 3%. The amount of dollars involved was so large that, there's not enough gold in the world at these prices. That's something that would shoot the price even higher. That's starting to happen. So, and then the fourth element I would list is, we still have bombs and missiles, but a lot of 21st century warfare is financial warfare. And this a lot started with the effort of really the EU, but the U.S. was involved at the early stage to steal $300 billion of treasury securities from Russia that Russia bought them legally, made the money on oil, bought them legally, put them in a custodian in Brussels called Euroclear. But when the war broke out in 2022, those were frozen. That's to be expected. But Europe took steps to steal them and use them as collateral for a loan to Ukraine. So Russia would be financing Ukraine in a war where they're fighting Ukraine. It was a crazy idea. It seems to have died down, but it was out there discussed for years. Well, if you're Saudi Arabia or Japan or Taiwan or Brazil or any large holder of U.S. Treasury securities, you're looking at that and saying, hey, what if the U.S. doesn't like something I do? What if I'm on the blacklist someday? Maybe I ought to diversify into gold, and they're doing that. So you have, again, I'm not saying they're dumping treasuries. That narrative is not true. But as new reserves come in, they are buying more gold. So these are really fundamental things that are pushing the price up, and are going to keep it there.
Jim Rickards argues that the Federal Reserve has little influence over today's gold prices. Instead, he points to powerful fundamental drivers reshaping the market. Rickards highlights that central banks have been net buyers of gold since 2010, creating a price floor by consistently buying dips. He also notes that global gold supply has remained flat for years, while demand continues to rise, an equation that naturally pushes prices higher. Institutional investors are beginning to increase small gold allocations, which could dramatically impact prices due to limited supply. Finally, Rickards emphasizes financial warfare and reserve diversification as nations seek protection from asset freezes by increasing gold holdings, reinforcing gold's long-term strength. Share your thoughts on their analysis in the comment section below. If you find this video informative, please support and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos. Thanks for watching.